So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on intelligent transport systems and their standards. We've got three speakers today. Firstly, my name is Catherine Whitfield. I am an Associate Director at WSP in the UK. We advise and support our clients in the design and delivery and implementation of intelligent transport systems. Those operating ITS in the UK tend to be public bodies, transport operators, local authorities, and covers all modes of transport. I'm also here representing ITS UK, who is a not-for-profit public-private sector organisation, which is financed through our members' subscriptions and provides a forum for all organisations concerned with ITS to knowledge share and to promote the benefits that ITS can bring to the transport network. So I'm going to kick off by providing a bit of an overview about what intelligent transport systems actually are and what they do. I'm then going to pass over to our next speaker, who is John Harrod Booth. John is an independent consultant, project manager and civil engineer who's been working in the field of specifying and deploying ITS systems in highways for more than 25 years. Right from the start, John's been involved in formal standards development through BSI committees and has travelled the world contributing to many CEN and ISO standards. John has chaired BSI's ITS National Committee, which is EPL 278, for the last 14 years, and is also a long-standing UK head of delegation to the relevant CEN and ISO technical committees. And then finally, we'll be hearing from Dr. Siddhartha Kasgir, who's the Head of Verification and Validation for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles at WMG, which is the Warwick Manufacturing Group, which is part of the University of Warwick. Sid leads several collaborative R&D projects with industrial and academic partners nationally and internationally, and his research focuses on generating safety evidence, test scenarios, safety of AI systems, and leveraging that sort of cross-domain nature of safety. He's also an active member of various national and international standardization and regulatory groups, including ISO, SAE and ASAM, and he represents the UK on several ISO technical committees. He also sits on the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe Committees on Safety of Automated Driving. Okay, so just to kind of start off then, give you an overview there, who we are. Bear with me. So what are intelligent transport systems? I think if you Google this question, and I have, you'll get lots of different answers and lots of varying perspectives. And I like to think of ITS in very simple terms. So ITS systems are any technology system which improves transport efficiency or safety or reduces environmental impact. And any of those can be defined as an intelligent transport system. Usually, technologies will include some application in terms of sensing, some level of analysis, some level of control and communications technologies. Really importantly though, for me, although the focus is rightly on the technology aspect of ITS, the systems themselves are made up of a whole manner of interacting parts, which include technology, but rely on an understanding of how humans interact with that technology. So when we're working in ITS, we're constantly thinking about human behaviour, about how users, how customers interact with the system, how operators interact, and how those systems fit in with the wider transport network. So it's not just the technology alone. But I thought it'd be useful to start looking at one of the most commonplace intelligent transport systems around, which is the traffic light, which we'll all be incredibly familiar with. Traffic lights work on predefined timings, which are either set in advance by traffic engineers or software, or they respond in real time based on traffic levels. So sensors in the road or above ground detection will monitor the speed and volume of traffic, and that information can then be used to dynamically change the amount of time green lights are shown on different roads or even on different lanes within them. Longer green light times can even be shown to different classes of vehicles. So, for example, emergency services or more sustainable transport modes such as buses can get longer green times. All of this can significantly improve the efficiency of a road junction by reducing the time when green light is showing and there's no vehicles waiting and they might be waiting elsewhere. Traffic lights can also work across a much wider geographical network. So, for example, a town centre, information can be gathered using the sensors and then analysed by looking at movements of vehicles through sat navs, through mobile phones, and all that can be used to analyse average speed and occupancy on a road network. That information can then be used to dynamically alter signals and also to set information and provide information to drivers so that they can make decisions about their route, about the time of their journey, and even about their mode of transport. So in that way, the impact of delays can be reduced and the transport network can be load levelled so that people use quieter times and reduce the amount of congestion. So beyond traffic lights, there are more than that. So ITS includes a whole range of applications that process and share information to ease congestion, improve traffic management and minimise environmental impact. Some of the examples you can see on screen here include systems which make the transport network safer. So up on the top left of your screen there, you can see the Smart Motorway system, which is in operation in the UK. Here, national highways use special cameras and radar detection to look for obstacles for broken down vehicles and other hazards. So rather than having to wait for an emergency phone call to be made, they can detect anything that's happening on the network and set signs and signals accordingly in order to support drivers and support sort of the safe resolution of any incidents. Technology can also be used to enforce rules of the road, so speeding or incorrect use of signals, which means that that road environment is much safer, and it means that things like emergency services can get to incidents much quicker. As well as technology being on the roadside, ITS systems also include in-car technology too. There are many technologies. Many of these are known as advanced driver assistance systems, and most vehicles are now fitted with a range of safety devices. So things like lane departure warnings, which use cameras to monitor when a vehicle is crossing the lines on the road, automatic braking, blind spot warning, even sensors which can test when a driver is potentially getting drowsy. Sensors on larger vehicles can be used to warn of cyclists nearby, improving the safety of vulnerable road users. The vast majority of collisions include are as a result of human error. So these advanced driver assistance systems are great at reducing the risk of collisions. Connected vehicles are also much more widespread now, and they're starting to be able to talk to each other and talk to infrastructure. So this is great. It means that warnings about adverse road conditions can be shared quickly and efficiently, and vehicles can even report when a road needs maintenance, for example. So vehicles can let each other know if they're braking or making a turn to ensure that others nearby are allowed, can adjust their driving around that. ITS solutions can also be used for significant environmental gain, particularly around air quality. So in general terms, by making the transport network operate more efficiently, there are fewer traffic jams, less congestion, and therefore fewer idling vehicles polluting the air. So by linking air quality monitors to traffic management systems, traffic can be held outside city centres where air quality is poor. It can be used for things like congestion and emission zone charging, around enforcement and those kind of things. As said before, ITS solutions aren't just for cars and drivers. Public transport providers benefit from technology too, through improved passenger information, through to bus priority, better journey planning, connections, and ease of payment. So public transport then becomes more attractive and easier to use and reduces demand for single occupancy vehicles. City planners also use ITS systems in their modelling to better understand changes to the transport network, and they can be used to predict everything from the effect of different lane layouts at junctions to looking at new developments, housing developments, that kind of thing, and the impact that might have on the transport network. And this traffic data can be fed in real time into models as well. So you can get a real time prediction of what's going to happen, which is really useful if you've got major events or major incidents which are happening on the network. So hopefully that's given you a really rapid overview as to what ITS actually are. These are just a few examples of the way in which technology is used by transport. As I say, the main thing is that by using these solutions, we can usually make important improvements to make our network quicker, cheaper, more efficient, and less environmentally impactful. So I'm going to hand over to John now, who is going to take you through his slides.
Hello, Catherine. Can you just confirm you can hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, that's good. I was having some audio problems linking into this, so I don't know whether it's easiest to do this by you pressing through or for me to share my screen, because there's quite a lot of button presses in this presentation. It's a different style of presentation to what you've just done, Catherine. But anyway, we'll go with you button pressing for me.
Okay.
Let me introduce myself. Catherine obviously said I'm John Harrop-Booth, independent consultant. I've been chairing BSI's Intelligent Transport Committee, which is EPL 278, for the last 14 years. You'll notice on this slide it says acting chair because I'm being retired. BSI chairman shouldn't be in post as long as I have, so I'm in the process of being replaced. It's an interesting challenge in the space of about 10 minutes to talk to people about ITS standards and standardization, because it's a massively complex subject area. Going on the brief that this is oriented towards people who are not necessarily specialists in the area and generally might be younger, then I'll try and keep it at that sort of level. I'll try and keep it quite general. Next slide, please. There's about 3 button presses on this. So when I came to the ITS world, and if you're young, then that will seem like an awfully long time ago. Sorry, is the audio quality poor? Let me just check.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, fine. So 1993, I came to the world of ITS standards. I believed, and a lot of people do tend to believe this, that there were some huge ivory towers somewhere with a bunch of boffins who produced these things, and that standards in their nature were error-free, were coherent, i.e. that they join across each other well, and they fit into some sort of master plan. 25 years later, I believe almost all of those things are not true. Next slide, please. There's about. Thank you. So the landscape of standards is extremely complex, even within the domain of intelligent transport systems. Applying ICT technologies to transport, it's very complex. It's organically evolving as well. So different technologies appear, different business models appear, different actors appear on the stage, and what we find is that they all cause different standards to be produced. And because there is no overarching master plan and there is no fact control, if I can use that phrase, then it's a bit competitive. The overall landscape is a bit competitive. And I spend a lot of my time personally, historically I've written a lot of standards, but I spend a lot of my time liaising, coordinating, foresighting what's coming, and trying to ensure that we don't produce too much in the way of overlaps. It's very difficult to do that. It's driven by multiple stakeholder communities. They have different cultures. That may be different people from different geographies, but also different business cultures. Some are very public sector oriented, some are ruthlessly commercial, some are intentionally disruptive. But we also have different political influences. What we tend to do in Europe is a quite a different way of thinking to what you tend to find in North America. We're in our nature more sort of social democrats, and government plays a larger role than it does in the US. Government in the US in general is a very, very light touch when it comes to anything standards wise, and therefore their approach to international standards reflects that. And of course we have different regulatory frameworks, both in the UK, in the EU, and globally as well. Next slide, please. Then there's the challenge of saying, well, what is a standard? And it is an interesting challenge. I would point you in the direction of something which I helped others write recently. So DFT have sponsored a piece of work which is called the Manual for Smart Streets. It's not yet in a fully blown production version, but if you go to the Transport Technology Forum website, you will find a draft version of it there. And it really discusses this point, which is we have standards at all sorts of different levels. For those who are in the highways industry, there's a couple of acronyms here towards the bottom: UTMC, the Urban Management Traffic and Control, and also the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, which are almost universally known in the UK. They are governmental standards, if you want to describe them as that. So they're UK government mandated standards. So in terms of international standards and the sorts of standards that BSI produce, they're a completely different set. And it's useful to know that that exists because that landscape is part of the complexity. Next slide, please. Sorry, next press. One of the criteria of what we tend to define as a standard is that it's generally freely available. I don't say free, doesn't mean that you can get it for nothing, but free on a reasonable basis. And that means that if your competitor develops the standard, that they cannot refuse for you to use it. And they can't charge you 10 times more than they would charge anybody else to use it. So there's a set of principles that apply to standards in that sense, and they're consensus driven. And so you should not find a situation where one organization or one individual develops a standard and says that's it, and that is the way it is. And that consensus challenge is extremely important for what we do. There's lots of them out there. There's lots of different domains, so you need to really focus on what's of interest to you. Next slide, please. Just to show you the challenge of this, even if we look at the definition of what ITS is, and I'm not expecting you to read the detail, I can go to ITS UK, I can go to ISO, the International Standards Organization, I can go to CEN, the European equivalent, and they've all got different definitions of what ITS is. So even the standards bodies don't agree what these things are, and that's part of the challenge. Next slide, please. And it fits in a context. So when, for example, Siddhartha's resume was mentioned that he's members of various committees and various organizations, what you find is that you find exactly that. So you find standards bodies who are predominantly focused on communications technologies. Others are predominantly focused on the car and the vehicle. And so it goes on. So if you do a few button presses, Catherine. International Standards Organization is obviously well known to BSI, and CEN is its European equivalent. In terms of European ITS, ETSI, which is the European Telecommunication Standards Institute, deals with communication standards and is extremely important. And so it goes on. And all of these entities, and I think I stopped just after W3C. No, I'll keep going. All of these entities are important in setting standards For those people who have a sort of broader background, you might think, well, W3C that's web standards, isn't it? That's the internet, as indeed is the Internet Engineering Task Force. But they're still relevant in terms of ITS standards, that those underpinning standards are still critical in what we do. So it's a very, very broad, rich picture that we try to fit into. Next slide, please. And I tried to paint the picture of that complexity because EPL 278, the BSI committee, is one of the most active committees that BSI has, one of the biggest portfolios of standards. We have a very strict mandate, which is that we provide the UK input into and also help develop and review standards that come from two technical committees, which is at an ISO level is Technical Committee 204, and at the CEN level, European level, is Technical Committee 278. They're both called Intelligent Transport Systems, and we, the British Standards Committee, feed into those two committees.
I think we've just lost you, John. You seem to have gone on mute.
I don't know quite why that happened, but I'm still here.
There you are.
Okay, so just to recap. So EPL 278, the BSI committee, feeds into and provides the UK inputs into ISO Technical Committee TC 204 and CEN Technical Committee 278. They're both called Intelligent Transport Systems. But there's a lot of other technical committees who produce relevant standards, have UK experts feeding into, and we necessarily need to liaise and understand what they're doing as well. Next slide, please. And so that process of trying to create the linkage means that there's a huge amount of interaction between these different entities. So it's never very relevant to say, tell me about ITS standards. And if you ask that question of BSI, they will point you to the portfolio of standards that come under EPL 278, and they'll say that's Intelligent Transport Systems. And it absolutely isn't, because the landscape is actually much richer and broader. Next slide, please. To give you a flavour, and Catherine's obviously covered this off, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. There are a bunch of functional domains where standards are produced. Those standards may be occurring in lots of different ways. So they could be related to communications technologies. They could be related to data structures and formats, terminology, hierarchies, data models, business processes, but also the more sort of general environment, roles, responsibilities, and these sorts of things. So it's a very broad spectrum of standardization. Next slide, please. The figures are slightly old. I haven't found a recent presentation on these, but it gives you a flavor. So within CEN TC 278, which is the European Committee, we have, according to these figures, 56 current work items and 72 at the ISO level. Actually, these figures are low. They have increased. But you also see a sort of general split across the different functional domains. So if you happen to be involved in electronic fee collection, tolling, which is very large in Europe and very large elsewhere in the world, but not very large in the UK, there are a lot of standards in that space. Very technical, very complex, but there's a lot of them. Others are much smaller domains, but this landscape is changing over time. Next slide, please. And I just put this up because I said the British committee feeds into a CEN committee and an ISO committee, which might seem very complicated. It is, because we're producing both European standards and ISO standards. But there's also a connection between the working groups that exist under those technical committees. And both technical committees have around about 10 active working groups. Some of them align, so the ones that are written in an orange color actually align and work jointly, and others sort of sit alongside one another, but what we do in Europe might be different to what we do globally. And there are some which we perhaps do in Europe that aren't done globally. So eCall, eSafety is a good example. Quite strong in Europe, deployed, regulated in Europe, does not really exist anywhere else. There are no international standards for this. There are European standards. Next slide, one button press, please. Just to take it down one level, so Working Group 8, Road Traffic Data, is actually a European committee that I convene. And if you press next slide, please. This picture grows up, so if you want to press several times, Catherine. So what we have is a suite of standards, technical standards related to the exchange of traffic management data. And the color transform, this has gone completely. So actually all of the circles which have numbers in them are the different parts of the standard. And so you can see from this sort of image that there is a structure within this domain. There is a structure about how this all fits together. And what's interesting is that above the bottom line, everything above that is produced in CEN, but actually the stuff below on the bottom line is produced jointly between CEN and ISO. So the technical how we exchange data is global. What we exchange of data is European. And so you see a little bit of that complexity in that image. Next slide, please. And ultimately, of course, I'm not expecting you to be able to read this, but there's a very, very large database in the background. So every one of those items across every one of those working groups ultimately ends up being a project, results in a standard. So if you do a further button press, I just pick out one example, and this is part 4 of the DataX series, and it's there. It has its own lifestyle and lifetime. So if you go one slide further, there you find a typical 24-month project in ISO, and it has its own process, its own step of ballots, its own step of reviews. Every one of these is a project. So it's a very large project management activity. Next slide, please. And how to get involved. We have some people who are heavily involved in actually writing standards, technical expertise. We have a lot of people who act as conduit through to stakeholder and trade associations. So they don't really write standards, but they're a reflector reaching out to their membership. And then we, of course, have people who are using all of this, which I shouldn't ignore. So the participation is important. Standards are not written by people in ivory towers. So if you go a few buttons, press more, Catherine. We have people who actually raise the need for a standard but don't write it. We have people who form the technical basis of standards. We have people who review standards. And that review process is vital to making sure that standards are sensible and useful and usable by the users. So all of those are meaningful roles. Couple more presses, please, Catherine. Sharing knowledge, so back to the stakeholder liaison with trade associations, sharing that knowledge is vitally important. And I will stress, standards in the BSI context are written by volunteers. And if you have no volunteers, you have no standards. So you really do need volunteers. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Siddhartha, are you?
Yes, I'm here. Catherine, is it okay if I share my screen?
That's fine, yep.
Perfect. Can you see my screen?
I can see that, yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, John, for the introduction. So I'm Siddhartha Kastigi. I'm the head of verification validation for connected autonomous vehicles at WMG. I'm going to talk a bit about life in the standards world, and once you get involved, what you put in and what you get out of getting involved. in the standards world. So before I start, I thought it would be good to give an overview of where I came from into the standards and how my journey has been in the standards world. And I'm not as I've not been as involved as John. I think John and Catherine go back quite a few years. So I got involved within the standards world officially, I would say, around 2017. But there's a lot of pre-work that I started doing where I was unofficially involved as a user or as an enthusiast, and talking and working with some of the UK experts on the committees back in 2015, 16, 17, and providing some unofficial comments. And that get me interested because of the fact that while I appreciate the creation of standards, sometimes they're not fit for purpose from a real world practical implication. And the only way to fix that is by getting involved yourself. So at that time, I was fairly lucky to be mentored by one of our UK experts, Simon Gilling, and also John was on at that time. And I was asked to become part of a UK technical committee as a UK expert on the ISO technical committee, and by its very nature became part of EPL 278, which John was chairing. And that was back in 2017. And that was just one committee that I was part of, and I started working as part of that committee. Over the last 5 years, the list has grown. Now we're part of roughly around 13 different standards and around 10 different committees across SAE, BSI, Assam, and had the good fortune of authoring a couple of the standards at national level as well as the international level. So what started off as a very naive interest of actually providing some comments to an UK expert back in 2016, 2017 times, to now actually being part of the committee that's actually writing the standards and creating them for industry and the regulatory ecosystem. It's been quite a journey. And one thing I would want to mention, especially considering the audience on the earlier side of their careers, is there are a lot of benefits that you get from being part of this journey. Obviously, you'll have to put your the work in to actually get all those benefits. But I'm taking that for granted that all of us are prepared to put the work in. The reason I'm saying that is there's a lot of benefits from a perspective of both personal as well as professional level. And I want to talk a bit about that because it's not very much appreciated in terms of what do you gain from being part of this journey. A lot of people tend to think that it's a lot of work. You have to attend a lot of meetings. You have to travel around the world. In the last couple of years, you have to be awake late at night because of time zones. Yes, that is true. All of that is true. I won't lie. But what I want to focus on is the benefits that you get out of being involved in the standards world. And I'll start off at a professional level, and then I'll come back to at a very personal level. And all of this is based on my own experience. To start with, I think it's the network that you create by being part of standards. So if you're part of various international committees, you're talking to people in all parts of the world. You're exposing yourself to lots of cultures, the way of working across different countries. So the network that you create is almost unparalleled. Sitting in the UK, working in your office, you will never ever be able to create the kind of network that you will when you are part of standards committees. And why is it important to create this network? I'm a big believer that if we want to roll out successful ITS solutions, be it autonomous vehicles, be it cooperative systems, no one individual or no one organization or no one country can do this on their own. We need collaboration, and when you are collaborating, you need the right people to collaborate with. So having the right network, people who are experts in this field, is very important if you want to make a difference in your field. And at a young age, all of us want to make a difference in this field. So being part of the standards world helps you create that network to make that difference. The other thing I wanted to mention a lot was there's there's a very steep growth curve that you experience if you get involved in standards world at a very early part of your career. From a perspective of staying in a cocoon in your office to talking to people with 20, 30, 40 years of experience who've been doing standards and ITS for a long, long time, not only do you learn a lot, but you also, not only do you learn a lot on the technical side, but you also learn a lot on how to make things happen, how to drive consensus. It's important to appreciate that creating standards is not a unanimous exercise. It is driving consensus. And that experience of driving consensus is something that you get from being involved in the standards creation process. So the growth that you have at a professional level, and as you grow from early career to a leadership role later on in your career, that experience of how do you drive consensus is unparalleled again when you are part of standards committees, especially when you're part of international standards. It's always good to start small at getting involved in the BSI level. So any of the technical committees like me and John are part of EPL 278. So I got involved with EPL 27, and that was my starting point. And then I got involved at the ISO level. So you can start understanding how you drive consensus within a circle of people from the same background and same culture. But the even more benefit that you get is from understanding how to drive consensus in a group of people who come from very different cultures, very different organizations, very different way of working, and how do you make that happen while not ensuring that you're stalling progress. So that's very important, and that's something that I've learned and gained a lot by being part of the standards world over the last 5 to 6 years. Now, going on to a bit on the personal side of things, I've talked about a few of the professional benefits that I had from the network and the growth that it gave me, but it's also given me mentors both on the personal as well as the professional level. So every time I'm in a dilemma, or I've got a situation where I need some guidance from people who are very experienced in this field, or who have lived their professional career and gone on to achieve loads of stuff, I can bank on the people that I've been working on the standards world. So I've got mentors in the US, I've got mentors in Germany, in Japan, obviously in the UK. I've been very fortunate to have John and Simon Gilling by my side all this while. So it gives you mentors that you may not actually have. And finding the right mentor is very important as part of your career progression. That's something that I've learned. I've been very fortunate to have all the types of mentors and backgrounds of mentors that I've had. And that's something that you will gain again by being part of the standardization process. And lastly, what I would like to say is one of the unofficial, unsaid benefits of being part of standards world is the friendships and the lasting friendships that you make. And you can discuss anything and everything with people on the standards world. You have very hard discussions during the day to drive consensus, and the evening you go out for a meal, and I think you make one of the best friends you might make anywhere else. And I think that's a very, very powerful motivation, because we need people around us. Human beings are social animals. We need people around us, and people who can be mentors, who can help your growth, at the same time be your friends throughout the process of your career is very important. So I've been, again, very fortunate that I've been working with friends who I started working with colleagues on the standards world who now are my friends at a personal level. So I think those are the kind of things that you gain from being part of the standardization activities. There's a lot said around the effort and the work that you put in. There's not enough said on the benefits that you get from being part of this journey. And I would highly, highly recommend to people who are thinking of springboarding a career or getting involved in standards, please do. If you're hesitant, please reach out to people in BSI. If you're working in the ITS community, please reach out to either Catherine or or Sarah or John, and we'll be very happy to help you through your journey in the standards world. So that's all from my side. Over to you, Catherine.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Siddhartha and John, for your presentations there. That's been really good. I think there are a few minutes for some questions. I can't see any questions have come up on the chat room or on the Q&A. I'm not sure whether anyone else can see questions or if people just want to unmute and ask questions. Nothing. Okay, I have got a couple of observations to make more than anything, actually. Siddhartha, I really valued the comments you were making there about friendship and about the benefits of getting involved in this kind of community, and that's something that hadn't necessarily occurred to me, but it's you know, really good to hear that. Because I think one of my takeaways and observations from the words that John spoke were just about the complexity of everything and the complexity of the different levels of standards and the different standards organisations all working together. So I guess I would be interested to hear from both of you, actually, whether those complexities acted as a barrier and how much of a barrier that they do act as, and kind of, you know, how do we overcome that, I suppose?
I suppose I would say, do they act as a barrier? Of course they act as a barrier. We live in a complex world. Even the sort of domain that we three all operate in is limited, but you can see it leaches over to other things. You were talking about land use planning, for example. It leaches over into all sorts of worlds, and it's crazily complex to try and say, well, I'm going to define it and really try and put it in a box and we'll define the boundary of it and it will be straightforward. It doesn't work like that. I noticed one of the next sessions coming up is digital twins, and digital twins is a big thing in transport at the moment. To what degree do we gain benefit from being able to create digital twins? It may be a digital twin of a city, it may be a digital twin of a vehicle. And so I think there's a lot that can be done, but it is complicated and it grows the whole time. And that's actually part of what makes it really interesting, is it's constantly changing. And I wholeheartedly agree with Siddhartha's last statement, which is there's not many people who I have known for 25 years on such a regular basis. And yet that's true in standardization. There are people I have known for 25 years and it's a joy when you get to see them again. Sometimes you argue with them, but that's life.
I'll just add to that slightly. I would say, I think it gives you training to solve complex situations in your professional career. So yes, the complexity of standards and the different standardization bodies can act as a barrier, but also if you take that as a challenge to unlock that barrier or overcome that barrier, it gives you that training as to how do you do that in a normal job, because we all will have such situations, not in the standards world, not like creating standards, but very similar situations that will act as barrier and how you overcome them. So you can use that as a training ground also.
Yeah, that's lovely to hear. And as you say, it's I know myself getting involved in some of the ITS UK world, if you like, it's so nice to speak to people and just get challenged in a different way, both technically and, as you say, around you kind of behaviours and relationships and things like that. Okay, so I can't see any other questions that have come through, and I think this is the time that this session was scheduled to finish. So yeah, I guess that's it then. So thank you so much again to John and Siddhartha for joining, and hopefully people have found that useful. I know I certainly did. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Bye.